All right.
We're live.
Yeah, I've lined up a few little kind of semi work discussion type things for us here in ABT land. And the biggest of all is this signal to noise realization that I'll be interested in all your thoughts on. I'll get to it in a minute or two. Um, Here's one little thing to share, which is we're doing with one of the guys from FAA. He sent, don't read any of this. It's just an essay or in the beginning of it. What is it? It's a statement, basically, kind of a project statement. I gave it the color coding and then sent him back what is really, Matthew, we didn't haven't talked about this yet, but
Mm.
this really needs to be added into our tools, basically. This is your um the I think sort of the simplified idealized structure of an essay of that sort, which is you start with the little roadmap thing there at the beginning where you go through your almost one sentence ABT. What's the basic thing here? Problem you're working on, action solutions. And then you expand things out into the more detailed ABT version, and then you summarize at the end to some extent. And I think all else equal, this is a good simplified starting model for anybody. We're constantly getting this question of, okay, I see how the ABT works for one paragraph abstract of a research paper, but how do you expand it out to a 10-page essay? This is the starting point of how you do that. And then inside of those things, inside that big blue bar there, you could have sub ABTs going in there as part of the setup and yada yada on and on like that. But I think this little diagram we've never really quite put together. We should kind of perfect this a little bit and use it for the starting point. What do you think, Matthew? Is that pretty much what we live and breathe?
Oh yeah, and this is exactly what I would expect. I always tell people like by the time we get to like the last big therefore, the last big green block, I'm fine if that's huge. So this
Well,
lines up already with my
and
thinking.
to that very specific point, by the way, when you read over the I Have a Dream speech by Martin Luther King Jr., that's exactly the structure, is that he
Mm.
goes through a whole bunch of stuff, a whole bunch of problems, and then the whole last third, the entire last third of the speech is therefore let freedom ring, therefore do this, therefore, go to I've been to the mountaintop and I've seen this and this. It's all basically, you can put the word therefore in there for every one of the sentences almost. And that's what he's done is he's gotten to the end and it's all just yada yada yada. And then if you study the history of the whole thing, there's the famous incident. See, this is what's kind of sad is that all of these speeches have been analyzed over and over again over the years from all these people who don't have any insight into narrative structure. And so they analyze and worship and praise these things with what they have for tools, which is the prose and the specifics and the content. And that's all great. They just don't have any access to this dimension of looking at the beauty of narrative structure, which came out of the depth of narrative intuition that those great speakers had. And so the famous anecdote that's told about the I Have a Dream speech is that he got two-thirds of the way through, and Mahalia Jackson was there next to him on the podium, and she leaned over and said, Martin, tell him about the dream, which he didn't have written up. And then he freewheeled for the last third and went into the I have a dream and I've been to the mountaintop and all those sorts of things. And so that's all the green stuff. But anyhow, that's what basically what she said to him was give us the therefore. Get to the point here. Um, so that's how it goes. All right, therefore, let me talk a little bit about last week, the interesting visit that I had to Atlanta and was hosted by the folks on the medical school at Emory University. They are literally directly across the street from the Centers for Disease Control and Prevention in Atlanta. Huge facility there, multiple, I think, I don't know how many buildings there are, like maybe 20 or 30 buildings. There are 10,000 employees. And this is the main building there. 15 years ago, I did 5 visits there and did workshops. The sad thing now, you can see even this photo that I just took offline, is the bullet holes in there. And everybody was talking about the bullet holes. And so there's, I think 150 windows were hit by the 500 bullets the guy shot, and some windows have up to 18 holes in them. And apparently the glass is so thick that it's going to take them months to repair all of these things. So it's just sitting there right now with all of this damage on it. And everybody talking about it. It's just really tragic. It's a symbol of what's going on today. As I drove up the hill to the building I was headed to at Emory University on the left side, this is on the right side, and hadn't been there for 13 years to CDC. You can't read that on there, but basically that sign at the bottom there was, it said museum is closed indefinitely or whatever. This is their CDC museum, which is beautiful. I visited it long ago. It's closed. Everything's closed. And then the real shocker was this is what it looks like. 15 years ago, when I did those visits, there was no security at all. You just drove right in here and you went and parked in the garage. And now they've got all these barriers, and off to the side, they had a whole bunch of military guys with their automatic weapons and everything. Welcome to America today. That's really what it's all devolved into. Okay. Andy Reynolds, I see you're here with us for at least a little bit. So, yeah, last week I had two more Nightingale experiences. Literally two different people, a faculty member and a member of our course, came up and started telling me things, and then I had to explain to them, "You're a Nightingale." And they go, what are you talking about there? So, Andy, you want to share this with us once again? We're really solidifying this into the ABT lexicon. Tell us what you told me the first time we ever talked about being a Nightingale.
Well, I'm glad to hear that we nightingales are propagating. I didn't know we had such a
Yes.
large flock around the world. Um, a little over a year ago, I was struggling to make sense of my science or medical organization's external communications, trying to figure
I
out
think it
how
was
we.
2 years ago at this point.
It was 2024,
Oh,
June
okay.
2024. Yeah.
Okay.
Um, and I was Googling all sorts of things, and for a long time, had an affinity for what's called the Pixar pitch. Pixar pitch is a variation of um, the old Joseph Campbell narrative cycle that the Pixar movie studio allegedly, according to the writer Daniel Pink, uses to summarize all of their projects, all of the movies they're working on. I had always been intrigued by that, had tried to make that take hold and sort of the standard at my company. And as I was looking for a better, cleaner way to organize what I had unwittingly known, God damn it, this our speakers just say and this and that and this and that. I discovered this guy who had codified and. So that was a breakthrough moment for me because by that point I'd been in healthcare marketing and communications for a little over 30 years, and I'd always had this nagging annoyance that some of the most talented clinicians or researchers are absolutely terrible at explaining themselves. They seem to just want to bombard you with accolades and detail, and their peers seem to like it. Anyone who hasn't been through their training completely loathes it. And I'm somewhere in between. I can appreciate what they're trying to say, but I know that what they're saying is a turnoff or anathema to most people. So the nightingale is a species of bird that doesn't know its own song until it hears an older nightingale sing it. And then once it hears the song, it's as if a script is unlocked in the younger bird, in the younger nightingale. And lo and behold, the previously silent nightingale has a beautiful melodic song. So the nightingale experience is one that I felt like I had when I discovered Randy and his stuff, because without knowing it, I had always been annoyed at and through my affinity for the Pixar pitch, essentially was an aficionado of ABT style narrative before I knew it existed. And I was thrilled. And I told Randy, yeah, it's been just a year and a half, Randy. And honestly, this discovery has been the most intellectually stimulating thing I've come across in many years.
That's
I think
really
it's great.
wonderful. Yeah, and so last week at Emory, this was the fourth. We're now in the middle of the fourth year. We're teaching the ABT course there. It's the full 10-hour course. And so it meant that I gave this talk last Thursday morning. There were lots of people there that had done the course in previous years, and then there was a young woman who's in the course right now. She's actually a graduate student, I think, at University of Georgia, but she was driving all the way over like an hour and a half to do the course there. And she came to the talk, and then she came up when I was done with the talk, and she said, first off, I'm getting so much out of this course, but more importantly, is that I feel like I've always known this narrative structure. I haven't known this model and this name for it. And then I explained to her, oh, you're a Nightingale. And then the same thing happened on Friday with a faculty member there who was really a great communicator, great guy, one of the last meetings that we did. And as he talked about the same thing, he said, for years I've written these things, and then when I started reading your stuff, like, oh, that's the structure behind what I do normally. It's really that's such a great term, nightingale thing, and I've run into lots of people for the last 15 years that do the same thing. I've known this all along. So thank you for that term. We're using a lot nowadays. Okay, so here is a part of what I was doing for background work, getting ready for that talk last Thursday, is this interview that David Brooks did with Steve Bannon last year. The more I've read it, the more I've studied what he said there. And I knew this the first time I read it. It just, everybody beware. Steve Bannon understands this society, I think, almost better than anybody else in the society at an analytical level. And I think Donald Trump understands it at a visceral level. And together, they've got control of the whole place right now. And through the communication side, Bannon gets it. And so much of what I've read matches with my assessment of things. I've spent a lot of time looking at Marshall McLuhan and what he had to say in the 1960s, and he saw this all coming. It's really the story of my entire life as I get ready to turn 70 on Friday. That I was brought into a world that didn't have information overload, and everybody's lives were slow and thoughtful and meaningful. And then it began to accelerate in the 70s. And as it did, Marshall McLuhan was a guy who said, there's going to be a dark side to what we're doing here. If we produce this information with no bounds on it, we're going to end up with what he termed the information maelstrom eventually, the swirling vortex in which the amount of misinformation produced will exceed the amount of information produced. It just took 40 years to get there, but we're there now, and that's what's going on since the pandemic. And I think along the way, it's people that have really gone and done the visceral experience with media production. And Bannon was involved in at least 50 Hollywood or 15 Hollywood movies that he produced. So he's done that experience, and Donald Trump was involved with the production of The Apprentice and other media things like that. Both of them have been on that side of creating media. And none of these academics have that experience. They've sat there in their ivory tower writing books, reading books, and trying to study media. But unless you're involved in making it, I don't think you quite get the visceral side of it. He was. And as a result, when I read some of the things that he says in this interview in particular, these are the two things that I presented in the talk last week. Talking about Trump, he said, I call Trump a Marshall McLuhan-esque figure. McLuhan called it right. He says this mass thing called media is going to so overwhelm evolutionary biology that it'll be everything. And Trump understands that. That's why he watches TV. And then the second paragraph is the deeper thing where he said, Trump understands that to get anything done, you have to make the people understand. And so, therefore, constantly, we're in a battle of narrative, unrestricted narrative warfare. Everything is narrative. I wrote one of my self-published books 4 years ago titled The Reverse of That, Narrative is Everything. And in that regard, you have to make sure you forget about the noise and focus on the signal. Well, that line right there has spun my head around the last week and a half because we've been doing this ABT stuff. I've been doing it 15 years, and I've never thought about it in terms of these two terms, the signal to noise ratio. I think, and this is what I really want to hear your thoughts, all you, especially analytical folks in this group. This is the whole purpose of this group is us brainstorming together and soaking this in because I think that this is what it comes down to is that here's what we've got in today's world. We've got these poor Democrats right now with this government shutdown. They're constantly trying to argue the facts, trying to throw information out there into this maelstrom, somehow thinking that's going to do something. The Republicans have understood for a long time it's about form, it's about getting everything together into that unifying form. They have had a better feel for signal, and especially Trump from the outset. Look at he's 10 years later still going with the same MAGA signal. Nothing has changed that. The Democrats just continuously are changing what they have to say, and they just don't understand all their breadth and diversity they're so proud of. It ends up being just a pile of noise when it comes to communication. And I fear that they are a style of the past. And unfortunately, and this is being well documented. There are a lot of essays being written about how AI is going to select for fascism, is going to select for these dynamics, this ABT stuff, at its absolute most focused signal. And I think this is a new way for us to start thinking about what we're doing here with the ABT. And basically, we've got these two templates, the narrative and the non-narrative template. The narrative one being broken into three parts: setup, problem, solution. And non-narrative, that's the problem there. It's noise. That's what we've been talking about all since the very beginning. And the reason it's so inefficient is it brings with it a ton of noise. You've got all this extraneous stuff. You haven't gone through and filtered it trying to select what's the central signal stuff. With the ABT, you're doing a lot more of that. And so what you're doing here is trying to find the signal. And so Matthew and I were talking about this morning was that 10 years ago, when I first started our story circles training coming off the Houston book, we developed a basic rule that we thought was correct then. We've now revised this, but what we used to say is, here's the deal: the and stuff is we didn't call it noise, but it's a bunch of junk. You want to keep the and to the bare minimum. The real powerful stuff lies in the but and the therefore. So what we recommend is when you write an ABT, keep that blue material to the bare minimum. Get us, everybody wants to know what's the problem here and how are we going to solve it. And then with time, and especially the last 3 to 4 years working with Matthew, when he began the course with me in 2020, that was the basic rule. And then together we began to month after month start to question this, like, wait a second, it's looking like this blue stuff is actually really important. And if you don't do a good job with the blue stuff, then yeah, you've got a nice signal of button therefore, but you haven't really set it up and it's not going to have much of an impact. And so the deeper we've gotten onto it, the more we've really come to realize that yes, there's a lot of noise in the but the and is so important that instead of just going with that, you want to focus on the and you use the but in particular. That's your strongest signal, which is the problem. That's why we try and work with everybody, get that down to 5 words or less. Once you've got that purified as the signal, then that's the tool you take backwards into the blue material. And what you're doing is you're basically editing, you're sorting noise from signal in the blue material. And this is what every editing course you ever took in filmmaking tells you. It's the real challenge is knowing what to leave in and what to throw out. That's what you're doing. You're throwing out the noise and you're keeping in the signal. And then eventually you start digesting everything I just talked about here. You go back to this horrible human being and you look at this quote, forget about the noise and focus on the signal. That's how powerful and dangerous this guy is as he's continuing to guide the White House in how to work within a media-driven society. And I fear that there's not a single person that I can see writing and talking on the side of the Democrats that even begins to understand this. So I think it's really an unbalanced, unfair battle that's being waged at this point. And on that note, interested to hear, and trust me, I am not a fan of Trump or Bannon or any of that stuff. I'm a fan of being analytical and trying to look analytically at what in the world is going on here and why are these Democrats just so inept anymore, unable to accomplish anything. Who's got some thoughts on signal to noise ratio? Matthew, see anybody you want to call in from the chat there?
Charles, since we're raising hand, go ahead,
Well,
Charles.
Park, if you had something in the chat.
Park, dive in. We haven't heard from you for a while.
Oh no! Hi, good to be back, guys. I've been on the road, and good to see you all again. No, it's just the signal to noise thing, Randy. It has popped up on my radar over the last month like 10 times.
Wow!
Just in all different facets. And the first time was when was reading about Steve Jobs, and that was his whole productivity thing, signal to noise. And I go, yeah, that totally makes sense. And then I've heard it, and then here you bring it up again today, and I'm like, okay, universe, what is it you're trying to tell me? Because I've been inundated with this concept in the last 30 days.
And so, what is the universe trying to tell you? Tell us, please.
Simple, simplify, clarify. It's the noise we're all just completely conditioned to now. And the algorithms are playing off of all the negative noise out there. And if you are a communicator that's going to have an impact down there, you have to be extraordinarily crystal clear. And I was just reading about this new Democrat, young guy running in Texas, Talarico or something like that. And they say that he has an amazing stage presence. He's backed by Christianity, but he's not out there pounding the Bible. And he's got a singular message, and that is politics can be about love and not hate. And that's his signal. And he hits it over and over and over again. And he's getting this groundswell of people of playing against the enemy is hate that we've all bought into. And his signal is love. I thought that was pretty interesting.
Well, that's really, really interesting. And the talk I gave last week, I structured around the dream nightmare action structure. And then I spent a lot of time talking about the dream and how this country was founded on the dream. And that what you're talking about right there, that's dream language.
Mhm.
Yes, exactly. I mean, why can't the Democrats understand that and come out with something that's aspirational and dream oriented, and yet they constantly don't. They're just a bunch of, yeah.
Well, and this New York Times piece talks a little bit about that. They are giving a nod to here's a Democrat that actually has a message that people can understand, but they fear that the rest of the party just, as you've been saying all morning, don't get it, don't know how to do that.
And then they start nitpicking everything apart. Well, it's not doesn't work for exactly this or that. Yada yada yada. Interesting. Charles, did you want to say something?
Yeah. I'd offer the possibility that there's three distinct dynamics. There's always signal to noise, which means dump the crap and stick with the important. And
Hmm.
that's always true in any context. The second thing is uh, emotional import. And I think one thing where effective messages have is they have emotional power. And I've just read recently that's why religions have such power because they appeal to emotion and we are emotional creatures. So there, and ABT contains emotion because that's the whole and but therefore is engaging, we care. And the third point is structured information. So I've heard a definition music is structured sound. And any information we get, if it's not structured, it's noise. And if it's well structured, then it starts being coherent. And so I'd argue that those are three distinct, they're related, but three distinct things that can make a message effective.
Well,
And
and of course,
signal to noise is one of them, but it's
well,
not.
and what I would do, given my singular brain, is I would collapse all that just back to signal noise. I would say that signal, I would define it as multiple things. It's signal is by definition, it's what you want in there. And then beyond that, well, then what do you want? You want in there things that have emotional content, things that add to the picture, things that do this. And so I would still just kind of stick with I think the signal noise is the single overriding challenge of everything. And then you can subdivide the word signal into what you mean by that, but it's a lot of different things. Um, and
Randy,
just,
one last
yeah,
point on this too,
yeah.
that we saw it play out this past week with the Ryder Cup. So what happens early in the week? Trump takes the stage at the UN and he has a singular signal. You all are a bunch of idiots.
You're all going to hell.
And then the European team shows up and it has one signal. We are going to bury you on the golf course, which they essentially did until Sunday. And what happened around that was all the noise of how America showed up in the most embarrassing way, not only on the golf course, but in the fans, in the MC that was, getting the crowd to say F you. It was just a whole bunch of cacophonous noise on the American side, and the Europeans had a singular signal. We are going to bury you for what Trump said earlier in the week. Another example.
You're all going to hell. Jesus. Shirley, you got some thoughts to share with us? Yeah. Hand gestures. Unmuting.
Forgive me, I'm on my phone. I'm in Rio de Janeiro.
Oh my goodness.
So I have the electronic challenges, okay. But in any case, I put a note in the chat. I don't know if it went through. I think it was one transitioning from signal to no signal. But the note was ignore the flashbangs, follow the weapons.
Yeah.
And I had said from the beginning when Trump first came in, a lot of our colleges and universities and what have you, we're talking about what to do. I said nothing. You're not ready to move on anything. You don't have anything to act on. You don't want to pre-comply. You don't want to get to appease. And quite frankly, there is no appeasement. What you do is essentially ignore the flashbangs. And that has been good. That has been good advice. And I agree with you that it is about signal to noise. However, within noise, quote unquote, we often bury context within noise, within noise. And that's a mistake because signal can have more meaning if the noise that is contextual is there,
But if the
but not
signal
all this other stuff.
But if the signal is boiled down to such simplicity, I was talking with some people just yesterday about, I'm sorry, but Hillary Clinton is going to take to her grave crooked Hillary. This is Shirley's
I
Law.
know.
They failed to tell her own story, and she got her story taken away in a single word. And that is still 10 years later. It's on half of this country's the tip of their tongue when they think about her. And they're just, I don't know that there's any way to change it now. I mean, that's really sad. All the hard work and everything that she did, and that's what will go down in history is that simple little
Yeah,
label.
it gets boiled down to a demented person's tagging her. And quite frankly, I told you that her campaign, I said to you, I did not recognize the person that was being described
Yeah, but I would
in.
disagree with the word demented because what I would say is this guy with the lizard brain who gets narrative at such a primal level that he's able to, without analytically knowing what he's doing, he can pinpoint these things,
That's
cut
true.
through the noise
That's
of the
absolutely true.
society. Yes. Yeah.
But
And,
I also want to stick a pin in the fact
and
he is not constrained by the truth.
that's it. You're right. Endlessly. Exactly. That's a
Okay?
huge, yeah, that's a huge weapon.
His dreams are like La La Land.
That's right.
Okay? They are not in the real world.
Well, and this is
And
why I've said
you
for 20 years, the people who
follow him down the rabbit hole at your
Of
peril.
course. But this is why I've said for 20 years the people who are constrained by the truth really need to double their efforts on communication. The challenge is bigger for them. And then you turn around, you find out that those people do 1/4 the amount of effort. They think it's even less important. Oh God. I mean, just quietly on a side note, I locked horns with one of the deans there last week at Emory. Everybody else, it was all a full day of joy and happiness, day and a half. Everything was perfect. But there was one academic that I had a meeting with who is just in that world that basically you can read it. They don't really feel there's a problem, and got going in self-admiration. We're doing such a good job here with all this communication stuff. And then I began taking exception. It all went south, and it was really an awkward, unfortunate conversation because how can anybody in the academic world now not see the roof that's collapsing on them? The whole, establishment, the firmament is collapsing, and they're still
But
saying,
you know what the problem though? The problem is that they interact with each other.
that's it. Exactly.
Some of us go out and interact with other people,
That's
real
exactly what
people,
it is.
and
Yeah.
and when you start interacting with real people,
Yes.
you can
Well, and
begin
that's
to
what was coming
understand
out
how
was
they see the world.
yes. And what was coming out were lines along the effect of we're doing a really good job here of this and this. And I say, well, then across the street is a building full of bullet holes. How can you be feeling you're doing a good job when the world is attacking the whole institution? And it's
And
still
I
I couldn't
and
believe it.
I added that a DeKalb County policeman was killed.
Yeah,
Black guy
exactly.
in his
Yeah.
30s with a family.
Yeah.
Okay. So this was not just somebody who was like just, harmlessly walking down the street and decided that he wanted to improve the exterior of the building. This
Yeah.
was totally,
Oops. Argentina
totally
lock up.
different. And
Yeah.
I hold people up who are on the margins.
Well, and it's this idea that a single act can take down an entire institution, and that one act of shooting those bullet holes there has depressed everybody I talked to. That they were all talking about this thing. All of these bullet holes are still sitting there. They're all terrified by it. It's horrifying. Yeah, Andy, go for it.
Yeah, I listened to the Emory talk last week, enjoyed it very much. It was the first time I recall seeing so many references come together in one place, or at least in one talk. I know you've scattered stuff throughout books, but I really enjoyed your talk because it was the first time I had seen particularly Bannon emphasized so much.
Ah,
I would like to know whether he still thinks Trump is all that. I think Trump, as much as you have respected his sort of lizard-like intuition for narrative, I think maybe it literally is dementia or something. He's losing it. He is not nearly as effective on the conventional ABT front as I think we assume anymore. My latest evidence is his talk to the hundreds of generals and admirals just down the street from me here in Virginia yesterday.
Oh, is there a
Or maybe
transcript
it
of
was
it?
Monday.
Have you seen the transcript?
Yeah. I'll
Oh,
put the results in the thing.
please do.
Bottom
Right now.
line, yeah, he is full of buts. I think he uses but not as a word of contradiction, but as
A tick.
a conjunction. He uses but as and. He introduces non-contradictory sentences with the word but.
All right, wait,
Means
you've got us in suspense. You're not allowed to go any further until you share the metrics. Come on, come on. Liz is
all right, hang on.
jump out of her
I'll go
seat.
over. I'll get him.
Give us the
Hang on,
numbers.
hang on.
Give us the numbers. Give us the numbers.
Well, Andy, what you said
but
about that
beyond
with
that-
Butters and I literally have said the same thing one time.
Yeah. So he kind of fakes the metrics. Hang on, let me copy it all in.
He's a butt rammer.
Yeah, he fakes the metrics, but my God, it is a meandering mess of nothing. He spoke for over an hour, and it's dizzyingly dumb and all over the place.
Yeah.
And somebody mentioned the New York Times earlier. They, or a piece that I can also put in the chat, noted today essentially a similar point. It can be hard to discern these moments for what they are. Speaking of Trump's talk to the generals, partially that's because we hear from Mr. Trump so often. He is on TV constantly, but it's also because he has become so devoid of context. He seems unwilling or unable to modulate based on his audience, his settings, and then the screenshot cuts off. My bottom line, I think the born master of narrative is somehow fulfilling the horseshoe theory, where he's become so butt-oriented that he's no longer a model of ABT and is just a mess. Maybe this is DHY, despite however.
Okay.
I'm telling you,
let's dive. I mean, let's dive deeper
was.
into that, and let's involve Liz in this discussion, because this is really, we're getting to the point where seeing more and more nuance in these metrics. And I don't know that he's. First off, I don't have any quote respect for the guy. Let's be clear on that. It's not like I'm a fan, but when you see these numbers, it's just identifying patterns. And from the beginning, when he went off teleprompter in particular, he routinely shot up into the 30s for the narrative index. Now, what we've matured into is going from seeing that as really skillful communication as seeing it more angry, context free, exactly what you're saying. A really weak job on the context and just getting to all the shouting and things like that. But that said, I don't know that I would agree that he did a disastrous job with messaging yesterday. He got his main message across, which is just bullying and intimidation. The question is whether any of these generals are going to get together and do anything collectively. It's just surreal that he talked that way to them, both of those two guys. But those metrics right there, 37 and 3.4, that's the same old Trump. Now, the interesting thing we saw last week, Liz and I looked at the metrics for the UN talk, and what happened there was we kind of think, I mean, we don't want to get too caught up in just so stories and explaining everything after the fact, but the fact was he's got these two things that I've identified over the last decade, which is on teleprompter and off teleprompter. So when he's off teleprompter and he's shooting from the hip, he shoots up in the 30s. And then when Stephen Miller writes a script from him and it's on the teleprompter, it quite often goes under 10. And so he's got these two extremes that he tends to do. And then what happened, we think, on the UN thing last week was that he had probably the more reserved speech that was scripted, and the teleprompter broke right at the beginning, 3 minutes in, and the whole rest of the thing was winging it. And he ended up with an intermediate score. It was, what was it, 17 or 7 to 20 around there. It wasn't way up there. It wasn't below 10. It was in the mid range. And we kind of think that's what his brain did, freewheeling in a speech that was meant to be a little more reserved. It came out in the middle there. But
I guess my bottom line is I would love to know what Bannon thinks of his protege or whatever, his fanboy now, because particularly if you read the transcript, I mean, I don't know what he's saying. He's saying everything. He's talking about the weight of the paper that he uses to sign
Well, okay, but
letters.
no, you're getting down the fine scale of trying to understand that. At the broader scale, I mean, wasn't his basic thing the warrior code? That's all he was saying is we've got this whole bunch of crude principles that come from the Dark Ages that we're now going to bring back and try and enforce as the standard.
That was
I thought that was
that was
pretty
more
clear.
that was more that was more Hegseth.
It
I'm telling you.
was him, but
Yeah. Yeah.
still Trump was, I don't know. Yeah, the audacity of him telling generals they're not allowed to be fat. God, utterly bizarre.
Well, I mean,
Uh-oh.
don't be constrained.
Yeah, not constrained, exactly. Yeah, freewheeling, you're right. Yeah, and that gets the metrics way up.
Don't be constrained. Just basically, just let it come out. Vomit, comment.
That's what he did. Matthew, you got other folks things to say?
Dean, you were talking about filtering out noise from signal earlier. Do you want to chip in with what that was about?
Yeah, I'm one of the things I'm trying to do is sort of operationalize. Okay, we want to separate signal from noise. If I am preparing a presentation, I want to separate signal from noise. What is noise? And I started thinking about it, and indulge me for a moment, as though I was doing some sort of spectral analysis of an electromagnetic signal or something, and then there's electromagnetic noise. I don't have to worry about sound. That's not noise in that analysis because it's so far outside the range of the problem that I'm dealing with that I don't even have to worry about it, eliminating that. It's already gone. So noise to me, I'm trying to think about how to eliminate it. Noise is something that is so close to my signal that it interferes with my signal. It's not something that's off in left field. That's what makes it hard to decide to strip it off because it is so close to what I'm trying to get across and that it interferes with it.
This is really interesting hearing you say this because Matthew, it's making me think that with a lot of this training, we in the first day we should have a little discussion of what is signal and what's noise. Exactly what you're saying there. That's really a good thought exercise of, we talk about inner circle and outer circle, which is the same basic thing, but pushing even further for people to think through. In your world, what do you consider signal? What do you consider noise? What are you going after? That's really, really, is that what you're kind of?
Yeah, actually, it's funny you say that inner circle, outer circle. It's almost like the inner circle, outer circle is about people and it's about audience and who you're talking to. What I'm thinking of right now is signal versus noise is almost like inner circle, outer circle for information itself.
Yes.
And noise is stuff that's in the inner circle and you want to get rid of. It's not stuff that's so far out that it doesn't interfere with your signal.
I think that's an incredibly good observation. It's almost like noise is what carries cognitive load. Like you've got to figure out whether to pay attention, and that distracts our brains from the message. That's wonderful, Dean.
Yeah, that's very, very cool. And people talk about jargon. Jargon is noise to the outer circle, and then it's it's music to the inner circle. It's signal to the inner circle, right?
I agree with the sentiment of what you just said, but to be consistent with what I just said, I think I would almost say that jargon can be noise to the inner circle in that sense because I understand my jargon. So I have to think about it. You use that abbreviation, I think about it. Whereas to an outer circle, it's just there's nothing there. However, I do understand what you're saying there.
Wait, we recorded that moment just then, didn't we? We've got to pull that out.
We did. We have to clip that. Yeah.
Dean's definition of noise. that was brilliant.
I will regret that to the end of my
I like
day.
that jargon monoxide.
Park jargon monoxide. Well done. Well done, sir.
I love it.
Oh,
yeah,
boy.
if you want to suck the life out of any
You
conference,
win.
just
You win.
full of jargon monoxide.
Park, you win.
You were the new term of the day contest. Jargon monoxide. Matthew, more folks?
Albie had a question, but I think we basically answered it, that signal to noise is situational, that there's times when it's signal, there's times when it's noise. What I'm finding in working in ABTs is that blue material, the audience, when you're giving them setup material, when you're giving them basic context, they're trying to take everything that you're saying as a clue as to what the main topic is. What is this all about? And every little bit of extra context you're adding that you hope is like making it clear, so often I'm finding it's not. It's actually just more and more and more noise. Just cutting it off, cutting it all out, getting right to the chase, I'm finding really helpful.
Well,
Andy.
this is really deep and so interesting because here's another term I would toss out there, which is noise tolerance. And
Ah,
this is what I've complained about since back in the beginning of my science career was sitting in these weekly departmental seminars where the person is up there spewing out all this stuff that nobody in the room is following. Everybody's lost. And then by definition, even though it's interesting information, it's noise for the audience. And then the audience is just tolerant of the noise. Nobody will ever stop the speaker and say, "We're all lost. Would you go back to square one and catch us up?" That never is allowed to happen as just part of the basic ethics of sitting through one of these seminars. And it drove me crazy back when I was a scientist. Like, why? It's the emperor has no clothes. Everybody's sitting here playing along with this noise. We're all lost. And then you go to dinner and anybody follow that? No, everybody was lost. Andy, got some noise for us?
I have a theory. Yeah, I have a theory that a lot of noise is spontaneously generated by speakers as a stall tactic to figure out what they want to say next. In other words,
ah,
and then
Yes.
and then at that point, two things happen, in my opinion. One, the speaker becomes impressed or enamored by their own articulateness. God damn, that was a good sentence that just came out of my mouth. And here's another one. Here's another one. And it's sort of like the old myth of Narcissus, sort of falling in love with your reflection, falling in love with your own eloquence. I think that's one thing that kicks in. The other thing that kicks in is they've got a little script going in the back of their head where just as in normal conversation, if you think about it, you don't literally know the next sentence you're going to say or the next thing you're going to say. You just kind of trust in your knowledge of the language and the quickness of your mind that you will come up with the right words to say in 3 seconds from now. And so they're kind of spinning or buying time so that they can maybe get to something signalish, or maybe just throw in a little more eloquent but noisy filler until they can finally put a
Well,
period on their statement.
this is all so interesting because in the spring we had Jeannie Scott come talk to us about the Gish Gallop. What is the Gish Gallop? That's a ton of noise. What's Bannon's whole technique? Flood the zone with shit. That's obfuscation. That is noise. Noise as a weapon. On and on. The things you can do with noise. And all of a sudden, I flash back to an utterly idiotic anecdote to share with you. I'll try and keep it brief, but once upon a time, I was doing coral reef research in Panama with the Smithsonian, and I got pulled over by the police for speeding. And they, of course, were Panamanian, didn't speak any English. I got out and quickly got into telling them that I was a scientist studying coral reefs, and then began giving them a lecture on coral reef biology with all of the Spanish that I could think of. And they got so confused and bored, they finally just gave up and got back in their car and drove away. So that was a case of me using total noise and obfuscation as a weapon to clear myself from a speeding ticket. But I think this noise as a weapon is really a central theme here. And it was something I had wanted to, I didn't have the time to get into last week at Emory, but that's what's going on, is that Bannon and then the Michael Crichton thing from 1975, medical obfuscation. He knew the dangers of obfuscation. That's what that whole article is about, noise. The literature is getting so cram-packed with noise, it's going to become non-functional. And why aren't there more people in the science community talking in these terms of the great leading scholars that are writing essays? And why aren't they bringing this knowledge to this issue of misinformation? And they aren't. And again, I kept last week bringing up over and over again what happened on Monday, that announcement of Tylenol and pregnancy, and everybody there's minds had been exploded by how did we get to this point where the CDC and NIH are coming out with these statements that are complete nonsense, noise, misinformation. But they're getting their way with it. Yeah. We got the 9-minute warning.
Can I ask Randy?
Yeah.
In that case, is that signal or noise? I mean, it's back to what Shirley said, unconstrained by truth. By your argument, I think that is saying Tylenol causes autism is signal if it's getting through really clearly. So it's not noise in that sense, right? It's just false, but it's still a signal.
Yeah.
It's still a strong, clearly defined message. So I mean, we have to be careful how we use noise and signal.
I think we need more thought and discussion on this word noise, that we're just starting to land on it. Speaking of noise, is that Ron Britton with us? Ron, are you there? Ron, can you share a few notes of noise from the government service world?
No, because I'm in the office.
Oh, okay, okay. We'll keep you anonymous.
I suspect next Wednesday I'll be able to, though.
Matthew, did you hear back from the FAA guys? Are they going to be there?
They are going to be there. Yep.
They're in their office. Okay. All right.
Yeah, a few of them have emailed back saying things are a little hectic today, but they will be there.
Yeah, Jiminy Christmas. Okay. Well, yeah, Ron, Lynette was wondering what you were up to. We were talking the other day about, yeah, what's going on. So Ron is with the Forest Service, and so yeah, government agency world. Um, yeah, coming to final topics here, Matthew. Other thoughts?
Albie, you have like a real life example of signal versus noise. Did you want to share that?
Yeah, I think the reason I kind of got into thought about science communication was, again, we had to make this, it's constraints, right? And so for us working, for me working at the science center, a lot of it is, here we are, like people don't have to stay, they're going to walk away. And so for us figuring out what to put on, we had 8 foot by 4 foot, just stand alone, sitting there minding its own business as people are waiting with their popcorn for the IMAX movie. And it was just, I mean, it's everything from just font size, right? Like, and then you really had to learn to, like, we always cut off a limb of stuff that we thought was so interesting that we wanted people to know about hurricanes or elephants or whatever. And you're just like, no, there's just no room. There's no space. It's not interesting enough. It's not whatever.
Well, and right there, that's by definition noise.
Exactly. And so I think that was for me the real, like, in terms of to talk about signal to noise, that was such a huge lesson of, like, if the font size is too small, it's just everything. It's no one's going to read it. If it's this, if it's that, like, there were so many things that we were like, people are just going to walk away. So as much as I hate that I have to leave out this really interesting thing, as much as I hate that I have to shorten this, like, you just kind of go, okay, that's all there is. And that was like such a huge lesson of, like, signal to noise. Like, you've just got to really think about what is the most important, the most interesting to a public who has never seen a blah blah blah, and you just really whittle, and it's hard. It's
and I think exactly,
like, you're throwing out some of your favorite stuff.
Yeah, well, along the lines of obfuscation is that you're constantly, signal to noise is so primal. It's the absolute basic core dynamic, and that's why when I spotted it there in that Bannon article, like, oh my God, back in the beginning of my science career, I heard people talking about signal and noise. It is the primal thing. And then the problem is, and like in the communication stuff, people move this stuff to more and more complicated layers, and they love all the complexity. And the next thing you know, nobody even realizes all you're talking about here is signal and noise. That's the challenge, is trying to keep things simple.
Can I,
Charles?
So it's what Shirley said here. Like, what is white noise? And back to Dean, there's different kinds of noise. Some noise is just a wasted opportunity. It's taking up space. People won't even engage with it. And that's kind of what Albie's talking about, right? They just won't pay attention. Yeah. And there's another kind of noise that's more pernicious, which is it distracts you
into the wrong
because you've got to process it. So that they're distinct species, if you will, of noise. And I think white noise surely is the stuff that just, it's the blah, blah, blah. Yeah. As opposed to something you feel compelled to try to parse, and then you discover, oh my God, that was irrelevant.
Well, okay, here to get really specific on this, and I got to lower my voice so that he doesn't hear me in Minnesota, but that interview with Michael Osterholm, where he at the beginning mentioned the bats in the cave, that was noise, and the moderators picked up on that and never let go of it, and he didn't get his whole signal through of wanting to talk about the variants and how we're going to deal with the next pandemic, because once they heard about the bats in the cave, that's what you're talking about, isn't it, Charles? They were off on a different narrative direction that they thought was cool, but to him that was noise. Ignore that over there. Let's not talk about bats in the cave anymore. And once he hit on it, like, how can we not talk about bats in the cave? That's exciting. Wow. And just preempted the whole thing. And you're right. There's different types of noise. Exactly that. And that's probably the more disruptive, powerful, destructive form of noise that comes with it. A whole big narrative thread that lights up that you have to redirect. That's not what we're talking about here. Yes, it is. A couple more thoughts and comments. Matthew.
Andy Reynolds, you're referencing some articles by looks of things. Want to share?
Yeah. I just put in the chat a tweet that I saw. I think that Twitter account, the McLuhan Institute, is run by Marshall McLuhan's son or grandson.
Grandson, exactly.
Yeah. Anyway, so that was a post from a week or so ago that just happened to be about noise. I like that account a lot.
Oh,
I
what
think
really? What's the post about? What's the title of it?
he gives Marshall's definition of noise.
Oh, whoa. No, that's very cool. I've read several essays by him. He's the guy that has been battling Wikipedia because Wikipedia, every time he tries to correct what the medium is the message was about, the editors on Wikipedia reset it back to their misunderstanding of it. And then he ends up in his this article in 2021. He said, I've explained to them, I run the institute. I'm the grandson. If I don't know, nobody else knows, and they don't care. Well, we're Wikipedia, and we do have ways to do it ourselves. So yeah, poor guy.
That definition attributed to Marshall McLuhan of noise, what they call noise, I call the medium. That kind of confuses things further in my mind. But so I don't know. Yeah. Marshall McLuhan wasn't himself the best communicator from
and his grandson talks about that in this article and says it's rather frustrating to hear. That's the catchphrase everybody says, the irony that the great communication scholar couldn't communicate himself. And that's exactly what happened. As a result, he came up with this saying, the medium is a message, that this grandson said 90% of the people get it wrong. They don't even know what the hell he was talking about. So what kind of legacy is that? Well, last comment here in the final minuto. Who wants to wrap it all up? Matthew.
See, I think chat's gone. I think we've kind of covered everything.
Charles, you got a final statement for us on signal and noise?
I think it's a great lens through which to look at things, and I think it's important not to be overly reductionistic with it. It's one lens, but there's other ways to look at it.
Park Howell, we'll let you have the final comment on being reductionistic, given that it came up last week at Emory University in one conversation.
Being reductionistic, yeah. In my world, it is about being reductionistic, not in the science world. In the branding marketing world, we got to get to the point of the problem solution dynamic as quickly as possible. The ABT is the signal of choice, weapon of choice to be able to do that. Because we just find people going on and on and on and not making their point of what in the heck their product or service actually does for a person.
Okay, and so here it just reminded me here's the final little comment, which was the one conversation that we had there that turned into a train wreck. I started it off, and it was with these two communications people there that were experts. And one of my first sentences, I said, the problem is scientists don't listen. And then this woman said, that's an awfully broad and sweeping statement, basically implying that's awfully reductionistic. And I said, go look at the review of my first book in science. The reviewer said, nice book, but the guy didn't address the single biggest problem in science communication, which is scientists' inability to listen. And you got to make broad sweeping statements if you want to get anybody's attention and advance it. I mean, therein lies the dilemma. So endless on and on. Signal and noise was today's theme. And thanks, everybody. Another awesome discussion. And we will tune in next week for more of this. Adios, amigos.
Bye, everybody.
Adios.
Right.
Did anybody answer my question?
What was that, Shirley?